perceptual state cannot perceive its own percepta, right?
Let's see here.
Perceptual state cannot be the object of itself, right? The thing
Yeah,
cannot be the same state. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. We'll take my Neanderthal version of it and throw it in the trash real quick.
How's my audio volume? Is everything okay?
Yeah, I think you sound great.
Do I need to turn anything up, or is it all good?
Ah, sounds fine to me.
Okay, I'm gonna get some water.
Okay. What you up to, Detroyer?
I'm doing some other work. I forgot this was the time. For some reason, I thought today was that we were doing this on Sunday, but I'm good. It's fine.
I got you. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like super lengthy or anything. Can whenever you guys get done or feel like stopping the talk. Quantum, I guess, is Quantum's supposed to be up here, but I guess he can't for some reason. Okay. Now Quantum is advertising it as okay, my bad, Quantum. I just saw that. Quantum's like advertising this as like some sort of like boxing match.
That's ridiculous. I'm definitely not taking it that way.
Yeah.
That's wishful thinking, I think.
Sleep. So I might even okay, so let's see here. Let's see. Let me actually try this. Hang on a second. Let's do this. As you could see, I'm fully prepared.
Yeah, my bad.
Let's see here.
I'm even more prepared. And by that, I mean I haven't done anything in preparation.
We are live, and I'm really happy to have everyone here. So I like to have dead air on my stream, so maybe, Troy, can you tell us your philosophy of mind to maybe warm us up? Is that a good place to start?
I mean, there's a lot of sure. Thanks for having me. I guess roughly speaking, I'm a sort of identity theorist in that I think that so minimally every mental state that we have anyway are going to be some physical state, and I think some things can be said beyond just those sort of token identity statements regarding types. It gets quite complicated because and I think there's a lot of vagueness, so I can go into this very long rant of how I think our mental terms and concepts come to be about those sorts of states and how they can be about types of those sorts of states and how the extensions get filled out, blah, blah, blah. But that's a very lengthy conversation. And I mean, that's kind of the broad overview, sort of identity theorist. Sort of, like, strictly speaking, yes, a type of identity theorist, but it's quite complicated.
Very interesting. I myself, I'm not an identity theorist. My own views on the matter are still evolving. My main focus at the moment in metaphysics is the relationship between experience and reality, not in the sense of like epistemology, in the sense of like knowledge and reality, or the understanding knowledge generally and its place in nature, but the relationships between the structure of experience and the structure of reality and the contents of both. My main topic that I bring here today with me is mainly several critical, what's the word? Essentially several arguments that attempt to argue, so to speak, against the identity theory, type and token identity theory. Namely, those, well, yeah, I mean, it would apply, I mean, if you maintain that perceptual states are identical, numerically identical to brain states. This argument applies, as well as yeah. I mean, that's essentially what I'm focusing at here in the argument generally. And if I come off as kind of jaded, it's mostly because of I am um kind of tired, but that's okay. Um, so I'm viewing this as a casual discussion. Um, and we have a Detroyer, Quantum, Nirvana, and we've been kind of chatting back and forth on this, but not in too much detail. Occasionally, like several months back, Detroyer and I had some discussions with respect to some of the general ideas present in the arguments. The argument that I mainly bring here, that I'm bringing here today, I'll post a link to it in the main stage chat. It is, oh shit, I disconnected my keyboard, so let me plug that back in. Okay. So yeah, again, I'm not very interested in converting people or deconverting people or convincing people. Because I think on such fundamental issues, um, people kind of, and not myself included, there may indeed be just a tendency to uh, dig foxholes and bury yourself essentially, and try to fortify your position. Yeah, my position included, and as well as I'm assuming Detroyers. Um, Essentially, so there's no hope for agreement, I think, essentially, on some of these fundamental issues, because um, philosophy can be like that sometimes. Um, but I'm curious if anyone has. Um, you're only going to get less sleep the longer you argue. Yeah, of course. Um, I'm kind of rambling, but I was curious. Who here, and please, I guess, be honest, has everyone read the article? Or at least have people, like, skimmed it? Like, the article in full? Because, I mean, it's a very long article, um, but I posted the link in the chat. One cannot really fully, I don't think, appreciate the argument unless they try to read the whole thing. Because it's many people so far that have skimmed it have misinterpreted it. By thinking of it as something analogous to one hand, like I don't know, like you see like the MC Escher drawings and things like that. Or it's not like that. It actually goes back. The spirit of the argument, it goes back over 1,000 years. Um, well, I mean, yeah, we see this in Hindu texts, but not in the way that I presented. Mainly focusing on the relationship between subject and object, and the unobjectifiability of the subject. That's something which is actually inspired the argument, but I of course cannot use such terms because most people especially materialists too, they'd say I beg the question, because I even say, oh well, there's a subject, like there's a if we mention the terms subject and object, those are considered like archaic, or they're relegated to the continent, and terms which are not as palatable to some uh, analytically minded people. That's why I end up using the terms perceptual states or perception and perceptum as neutral terms, terms that are um, much less loaded, for lack of a better word. But again, I'm just rambling, so someone needs to stop me, because I'm just going to keep on rambling until I probably fall asleep at the keyboard. So take that as a cue.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I think when I was talking about this recently with quantum, I was just going off of what what he wrote or what I remember from the discussion. I haven't read this blog
I were to
post.
read it.
I
Would
could
that
take a
be
look.
um
Well, I have it up on my screen here. So
okay? I was just
um,
because the audience, I don't know if they'd be watching.
yeah, so I guess I'll skip to the relevant parts.
Well,
The the looks like the main point of contention is going to be this principle of perceptual self-exclusion, which just says that a no perceptual state can have itself as its own object of perception, something like that. And so, for example, if I'm seeing something or something, having in some way perceiving something, the thing being perceived cannot be that same state. It cannot be my perceptual state itself that's being perceived, whether by sight or something else. And I think that there's no in principle problem with this. So I think we're going to explore the argument. So let's see. There's a vicious regress argument for the principle of perpetual self-exclusion. Premise one, and this is going to be the relevant one, so I'm just probably going to look at premise one and then skip to the defense of it, and then maybe we can come back to the other stuff. Premise one says, if a perceptual state were its own perceptum, the thing perceived, then said perceptual state could neither exist nor occur unless a vicious infinite regress of perceptual states and percepta terminated in a final term. Yeah, so I think I'm going to, before I even look at the defense, it seems just immediately wrong to me. You can imagine this occurring in a world where there's only one perceptual state. Why would there have to be another infinite regress of perceptual states?
So let's start at the very beginning of the article, where I talk about perceptual states and percepta. So this is what I was kind of concerned about, going straight to the argument rather than focusing on the initial conditions whereby
Sure.
such regresses may start. Because I think if we skip right to the arguments, we lose the entirety of the actual the basis upon which the regresses can start. Because I mean, of course, if we skip to that, we'll lose all the context. So this is why I kind of wanted to read it out loud, so then you could stop
Sure.
me
I'm fine
along
with
the
that.
way, I think,
Maybe that would be
and
more clear.
then we can go on with that. So I guess I'll start with the section that says perceptual states and percepta. And let
Sure.
me actually put a hello right there, so that doesn't cause noise. Okay. Perception is a fact, and this fact entails that there are perceptual states and percepta. I use the term perceptum, plural percepta, the same way as Jamie McTaggart uses the term in The Nature of Existence. A perceptum, according to McTaggart, is that particular something perceived by a subject whenever a subject has a perceptual state. For any perceptual state P, said perceptual state is a perception of a perceptum O. For example, if John has a perceptual state P, then John has a perception of a perceptum O. Now, for any perceptual state P, the perceptum O of said perceptual state is always an existing or occurring determinate something. For no perceptual state is a perception of nothing. Indeed, if a perceptual state's perceptum was neither an existing nor occurring determinate something, then said perceptum would be nothing, and the perceptual state itself would be a perception of nothing, and this is absurd. Likewise,
So just a comment briefly on this. I'm actually good with all this so far. Especially if we're taking perception as a sort of success term.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. I think we talked about that before. You can keep going.
Likewise, a perceptual state P can neither exist nor occur unless said perceptual state were itself determinate. However, the determinacy of a perceptual state hinges upon the determinacy of its perceptum. Indeed, we can differentiate one perceptual state from another perceptual state only insofar as we can differentiate the characteristics of the former perceptual state's perceptum from those of the latter perceptual state's perceptum. To return to what was said before, a perceptual state P can neither exist nor occur unless it is a determinate state. However, the determinacy of a perceptual state depends upon its perceptum being either existing or occurring and determinate. Therefore, a perceptual state P can neither exist nor occur unless that state, which said perceptual state's perceptum is a perception of, either exists or occurs and is determinate. But this just means that a perceptual state's perceptum is logically prior to the perceptual state itself. And let me pause for a second. This is something which Aristotle points out. So it's not just me that's making this stuff up. We now arrive at the following result. A perceptual state P can neither exist or occur only insofar as its perceptum O is either an existing or occurring determinate state. Okay, so I think we agree with that. You're probably going to say, okay, well, it's not logically prior.
Well, I want to get clear on how that's being used here. So I would agree that there's particular state that for it to count as a perceptual state of a certain sort, it's entailed that the object of that perceptual state exists, or at least some object exists such that it's the object of that perceptual state. Mm-hmm. If that's what you mean by logical priority, that one entails the other, the first entails the second, then I'm fine with that. But if you're saying something more different, I'd have to know what that is.
Well, let's look at logical priority. So logical priority usually is different from like chronological priority or temporal priority. And it's in the sense that for a, let's see, in the sense of like a perceptual state, there has to be something there in order to perceive it. So at the very bottom, AC or A.E. Ewing points this out. So let's see here. Let me find what he says here. It's here we go. So this is in his his essay on idealism. So he puts this in the terms of knowledge, but it could be easily transposed into perception. To know is to know something, and this something cannot be just our knowing it. No, so forget about. Of course, he's going to argue against your position, but this is where he points about the logical priority thing. Knowing clearly presupposes an object to be known, and this object is logically prior to and cannot be dependent on or made by the knowing. To say that the object depends for its existence on being on the knowledge of it thus involves a vicious circle, for it must be already if it is to be known. So that sense of what's the word? The one is essentially you can't have it without the other. But, I mean, essentially that's what I'm getting at here. There's it has to be there in order for, it's kind of like, in order for me to do something, in order for me to actually execute something, I must have already had that potentiality to do it. The potential for me doing it is logically prior to the execution of that thing, of which I had the potential.
Yeah, so I mean, again, if we're understanding that, I want to interpret this in the way that I already was, which is that there's this entailment, logical entailment from one to the other. So, like, if, in other words, A being logically prior to B, that's true if and only if B entails A. And so, applied to the cases at hand, you want to say something like, the existence of an object of perception is logically prior to the existence of the perception, because the existence of the perception logically entails the existence of the object of perception. And if that's all you're saying by this, then I'm fine with that, right? There being an object of perception, of course, is entailed by there being a perception. But if you're saying, again, if you're saying something else or stronger than that, then it's not clear to me. But am I missing something, or is that right?
Let's see.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yes,
about
I do.
thinking about
Yes.
it.
And
It's
I'm
a kind
trying
of
to
like,
see though. It's
if A is a necessary condition for B, then in a way it's logically prior, right? Because the occurrence of B entails A.
I would say that it's a bit different from entailment because
Okay.
for something, so we could go back to in the Parmenides by Plato. He talks about Parmenides attempts to refute the idea that the forms are thoughts, and
Right.
he says that if the thought of the forms were just the forms themselves, we would get ourselves into problems, and they must already essentially be if they're to be thought. But it seems to me that the kind of priority that we're talking about here is not just mere entailment, because one does seem, at least prima facie, prior to the other, but not the other way around. But let's forget about the logical priority part for now, because I don't think it's important. Because that could just be like an addendum that we could come back to later, because that's not really what I focus on throughout the argument. I don't really it's not necessary though. Even though in the defense of premise 1 I do bring it up, it's not it can be omitted and the defense still is there because there's another part of defense. So let's
well, the other potential question I might have on this paragraph is on the notion of determinateness, but if I suspect it probably won't be a problem, but if it is, I'll bring it up so we can continue.
The principle of perceptual self-exclusion. The results outlined above are complementary to the principle that no existing or occurring perceptual state is its own perceptum. Or, for any perceptual state P, P is not a perception of P. I call this the principle of perceptual self-exclusion. Personally, I find it self-evident, as do many others. However, I'll attempt to defend it by means of the following arguments, and I give one. How many do I give? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I give 4 different ones. As well as at the very end, I give 7. If you want to call it appeal to consensus of experts, but I give 74 instances of philosophers and psychologists and many others pointing to this, what they maintain as a fact, as well as Bertrand Russell. He gives his own arguments for it. G.E. Moore gives his own arguments for it, as well as other philosophers too that I mentioned below. But let's start. The vicious regress argument. Premise 1. If a perceptual state were its own perceptum, then said perceptual state could neither exist nor occur unless a vicious infinite regress of perceptual states and percepta terminated in a final term. Defense of premise 1. If a perceptual state, A, were to be a perception of A, then A could neither exist nor occur unless A were the perceptum of another existing or occurring perceptual state, or just an existing occurring perceptual state that was A, logically posterior to A, and 2, identical to a perception of A. However, this perceptual state, which would be logically posterior to A, could neither exist nor occur unless it were the perceptum of an existing or occurring perceptual state that was 1, logically posterior to the perception of A, and 2, identical to the perception of A. However, this perceptual state, which would be logically posterior to the perception of A, could neither exist nor occur unless it were the perceptum of an existing or occurring perceptual state that was 1, logically posterior to the perception of A, and 2, identical to the perception of A, etc., and so on ad infinitum. To make matters more concise, we can simplify the argument by pointing out that a perceptual state is logically posterior to its perceptum, and that nothing can be either logically prior or logically posterior to itself on pain of absurdity or contradiction. Therefore, no perceptual state can be its own perceptum. Regardless, the fact that matters most is that the above regress is vicious and not benign. The difference between vicious regresses and benign regresses deserves to be outlined.
So
let's go into the benign. Let's talk about
Yeah, okay,
regresses
sure.
first, because I think this is going to be important. So I bring up Russell as well as some other philosophers. Benign regresses of explanation. At each stage n, an instance of a puzzle is posed as an explanation offered, and this explanation gives rise to a new instance of the puzzle, forming stage n1. But the success of the explanation at stage n does not depend on the puzzle at stage n plus 1 being resolved. Vicious regresses of explanation. At each stage n, an instance of a puzzle is posed as an and an explanation offered. And this explanation gives rise to a new instance of the puzzle, forming stage n1, and furthermore, the success of the explanation at stage n depends on the puzzle at stage n plus 1 being resolved. Now that's important. So this is Bertrand Russell right here. An infinite regress may be of two kinds. In the objectionable kind, two or more propositions joined to constitute the meaning of some proposition. Of these constituents, there is at least one of whose meaning is similarly compounded, and so on ad infinitum. This form of regress commonly results from circular definitions. Such definitions may be expanded in a manner analogous to that in which continued fractions are developed from quadratic equations. But, at every stage, the term to be defined will reappear, and no definition will result. Take, for example, the following. Two people are said to have the same idea when they have ideas which are similar, and ideas are similar when they contain an identical part. If an idea may have a part which is not an idea, such a definition is not logically objectionable. But, if part of an idea is an idea, then, in the second place, where identity of ideas occurs, the definition must be substituted, and so on. Thus, wherever the meaning of a proposition is in question, an infinite regress is objectionable, since when we never reach a proposition which has a definite meaning. But many infinite regresses are not of this form. If A be a proposition whose meaning is perfectly definite, and A implies B, B implies C, and so on, we have an infinite regress of quite an unobjectionable kind. This depends upon the fact that implication is a synthetic relation, and that although, if A be an aggregate of propositions, A implies any proposition which is part of A, it by no means follows that any proposition which A implies is part of A. Thus, there is no logical necessity, as there was in the previous case, to complete the infinite regress before A acquires a meaning. So again, focus on part. That's important. So again, this is going to be A.E. Taylor below us. Here again, I think Russell is clearly right in holding that there is one kind of regress, which is always fatal to any hypothesis which implies it. No intelligible proposition can be such that an infinite regress arises in the very attempt to state its meaning. An apparent proposition P0, which turns out to be such that we cannot state its meaning without first stating as parts of that meaning the infinite series of propositions P1, P2, Pn, so on, must be no proposition at all but a mere unmeaning noise. For, as we can never exhaust an infinite series by enumeration of its terms, we could never know definitely what such a proposition 0 means, or P0 means. And every proposition must have a fully determinate meaning. Hence, for us at any rate, P0 is no proposition at all. So, those are some basic overviews of the difference between vicious regresses and benign regresses. And I'll let Detroyer chime in.
Yeah, very good. So I'll first make a quick comment on the logical priority and posteriority thing, and then get to the regress stuff. This is gonna, I guess, get us back to what your notion of logical priority if it wasn't entailment, because if it's entailment, then any proposition will be both logically prior and posterior to itself in that sense. So
Yeah.
if I was understanding it that way,
That's why I was not
yeah.
sure if entailment would be a good example or a good.
Well, it clearly isn't here.
Yeah.
If you wanted to say something like,
because you would probably say, I beg the question, if I were to say that it's not identical or it's not synonymous with entailment, and to say, okay, it's if I were to say, like, I mean, I think we get what each other is saying. I think.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily question begging. It's just that I'm not sure what the relation is, right? So, because I can understand the relation of entailment here. Maybe if you want to add something to that, or say that it's a different sort of relation, we could talk about that. But it's like whether or not I accept it, I'd have to understand what it is. But let's just go to the regress stuff, and we can come back to that if we want. I think. I mean, the regress includes just logical priority and posteriority stuff too, but not essentially.
Well, that's different though, because this involves. So we don't even need to talk about the logical priority posterior for the regress.
So, well, I guess not, but we can just talk about it in terms of entailments, I guess.
I don't think so either. It's one of dependency.
Yeah, but dependence I'm going to cash out logically as well. It's either we need some counterfactual dependence or entailment or something like that. So it's because when I'm looking at these statements, right, I see the first one which says A is a perception of A or something like that. Okay. Because it's true that A is a perception of A. It's also true that A is a perception
We're
of
not
a perception
saying
of A.
that it's true. We're saying if it were true.
Yeah,
so we can't say that it's already there.
No.
Because we're saying were it to, like, what are the conditions whereby it could have happened?
Yeah, but like we can assume for reductio that A is a perception of A, and then we can explore like if that leads to absurdity, and then reject that assumption. I assume that's like that's one way to phrase your argument now.
Sure, I'll let you do that.
So yeah, that's what you're doing. Were it to be this, then then we'd get this absurd consequence. So that assumption has to be false. I'm just assuming. Let's assume for reductio that A is a perception of A. Well, that would entail that A is a perception of a perception of A, and that would entail
a perception. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because
go on. Yeah.
Because it's true of A that it's a perception of A.
Yeah.
So you can substitute in this extensional context, blah blah blah. So that's also going to denote A. We're also going to it's going to be true of A that it's a perception of a perception of A. It's going to be true of A that it's a perception of a perception of a perception of A, and so on. Right? You can generate them ad infinitum. Of course, I think this is just entirely benign.
That's well. The way that you're putting it, I disagree. The way that you're talking about, it's different from that, because let's go back to what's going on here. If let's say, I don't know, I am. How should I phrase this? So if A, a perceptual state, or a perception of A, what are we saying here? Okay, so the perceptual state is identical to its perceptum. Now this means that the perceptum, what's being perceived, depends for its very existence upon its being perceived by a perceptual state. Now,
well, it counting as a perceptum, in other words, requires that there is some perceptual state that is the object of. Yeah.
Well, we could just say object. Let's just say object of perception.
Yeah, but it's tricky though, right? Because there's different ways to talk about quote unquote that object. One of them, and that object. So, say I had a car, right, and that car can be the object of perception, right? So I could perceive the car, presumably. But the object doesn't require for its existence that it's the object of perception, or that there's a perceptual state, on my view anyway.
But if it's identical to that, then it has to. It needs. Well, go on.
Well, but it's if it's true of the car that it is being perceived, right, that it is the object of perception, then it will follow from that there is a perceptual state of which it is the object, right?
But this is very different, though, because this time the perceptual state is the very thing being perceived. It's perceiving itself.
But actually,
it's not analogous to a car being perceived. A car does not depend for its existence. The car's existence does not depend upon being perceived.
No, but actually, I kind of no, because I want to say the same thing in the perceptual state case, right? The fact that I'm the thing being perceived as a perceptual state, okay, but it doesn't require for it to be that sort of state that there is something which is perceiving it. What? So same with the car. Well, obviously, right? I mean, you want to affirm that anyway.
The way that you're saying, so it seems like you're trying to say that, okay, it can be the case that if A, or let's just forget X, or let's use X because it's easier letter than A. If X is identical to a perception of X, then X can exist without being the perceptum of a perceptual state.
Of course, right? It's something which is a perceptum, or even a perceptual state, might be contingently a perceptum or a perceptual state. And the same case with the car. Right? The fact that the car is a perceptum is a contingent feature of the car. And the fact that some perceptual state that I have, which is just going to be some like phenomenal experience, blah, 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 something else. The fact that that's a perceptual state, I think is a contingent feature of that sort of state. So, I mean, maybe that's like unclear, but I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Let's see here. I'm trying to wrap my head around what you were saying before. So, when you're saying that A, when it's identical to P, like, cause I think, who was it? Quantum, I think, that was trying to visualize this thing going on with the help of some symbolism. Is it the case that does the perception, is it part of, or how should I fucking phrase this? Because I think we're talking in two different directions, or talking right cross purposes or something like that. It's like, if I am perceiving something which is identical to my perceiving, then it follows that what is being perceived is such that it must, well, in that particular situation, have something perceiving it.
Right.
And
that was a good start, yeah.
That perceiving of it must itself be perceived in such and such a situation, because it is identical to that very thing being perceived, the initial thing being perceived.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But
it could not exist unless it could not exist in the first place unless there was that third perceiving that I just said right now. But that third perceiving.
Oh, that I'm not. So.
But it's identical though to the first one.
No. But this move is I'm not accepting, right? So I do want to grant that. From the fact that a certain mental state is a perceptual state, it's entailed that there is something else which is the object of that state, the thing being perceived. And if, supposing for reductio, blah, 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 that the object of that perceptual state is itself, then it's going to be entailed that it itself is the object of a perceptual state, namely itself. That much is fine. But if you want to infer from that to the following conclusion, that also this state, mental state, could not exist unless there was something else perceiving it, that I reject, and I also reject that this state could not exist unless it were perceiving something, because, again, for this state, as for probably most, mental states that we have, the fact that they are perceptual states is contingent. It's not essential to being the sort of mental state that they are. So, for example, I could have a state which is, I'm just having some illusory experience or something. There's nothing being perceived. We wouldn't call that a perceptual state because there's not an object of perception. However, change some of the facts. I would say that we really only need to change some of the external facts, although this gets into theories of perception. And that self-same mental state would in that case be a perceptual state because certain things are satisfied. And the point of that, relevant to the discussion here, although it's not quite clear, because I still want to kind of get back to how the regress is vicious, and I'm not sure how this connects, but the relevance of this to what we were just talking about was that if you want to make this move to the state we're talking about, A, must be perceived or must be the object of perception, that I deny. If we're holding fixed the fact that it is a perception of itself, then of course that's true, right? That you can infer from that it's the object of perception and that's the thing perceived. But if we're not holding that fixed, then you don't get this consequence, if that makes sense. Because that self-same state could be something which is not being perceived or perceiving.
And I'm saying that it is being perceived here.
Right. In the case that it is being perceived, right, then it's going to be true of that state that it's the object of perception. And in the case where it's also it has itself as its own object of perception, it'll be true of it that it is perceiving something, is a perceptual state of something. And that's fine. But how do you get that this occurrence requires?
Are you familiar with higher order theories of consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not.
Are you familiar with Franz Brentano?
Brentano or
Yeah.
Vaguely. I actually had a professor who specialized on Brentano, but
okay.
But I don't really know much about him.
Okay. Are you familiar with one of the reasons why many people find? Well, I guess I'll just talk about this. Let's talk about intentionality. I think this is one of the key
the mark of the mental
here.
stuff, or is that what you're going to talk about?
Yeah. So Brentano, he was worried in the philosophy of mind. Vicious regresses are very always pointed out, especially when it comes to like higher order theories of consciousness and things like that. But what makes a mental state a mental state? But the nature of intentionality is something big, and I think this is something which should be covered. So this is another argument, I guess. So we could just push aside the vicious regress one at the moment.
Sure.
Because there's just.
I mean, we've talked about the argument from intentionality one before, though.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to accept the.
Yeah, and I'm going
to
point out that I'll make some T-jump moves here, and consensus is you're wrong, therefore you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But let's because I think this is something that's the audience might find interesting, as opposed to the other one, which was kind of technical and it wasn't going anywhere. I think we were.
Sure.
Yeah. So let me scroll back up.
What's the one? What is this one? The indeterminate percepta? Is that something different?
That's about that's a bit of a different one. That's like, well, what is it? A perception? Well, it's similar, but let's go back to the intentionality one for the time being. Then we could go to the more one, which is I think is also.
I probably have to go in about 10 or 15 minutes though, so we can pick one and just kind of go with that.
So let's see here. Then let's go to the GE Moore one.
Sure.
So that's
this one says the Moorean argument for the principle.
Yeah. So GE Moore here. This is from his. In his much celebrated article, The Refutation of Idealism, I'm using that sarcastically, G.E. Moore presents an argument which can be used to demonstrate the truth of the principle of perceptual self-exclusion. I will briefly outline his argument. A perception of X is identical to a consciousness of X. A perception of Y is identical to a consciousness of Y. Also, I want to point out, too, the early identity theorists held to this same distinction. That's why they brought up, like, UT place, the whole phenomenological fallacy. They maintained that, no, when you have, like, a sensum or something like that, it's not that your brain... it's the sensing that we're focusing on. The consciousness, that's the mental part. The Y, that's the physical part. But let's keep going. A perception of X is identical to a consciousness plus X. A perception of Y is identical to a consciousness plus Y. A consciousness of X is similar to a consciousness plus Y because both have consciousness as one of their constituent parts. Consciousness plus X is different from a consciousness plus Y because a consciousness plus Y does not have Y as one of its constituent parts. While a consciousness plus Y does have Y as one of its constituent parts, a consciousness plus Y is different from a consciousness plus X because a consciousness plus Y does not have X as one of its constituent parts, while our consciousness plus X does have X as one of its constituent parts. X is similar to Y because neither have consciousness as one of their constituent parts. X is different from a consciousness plus Y because X has neither consciousness nor Y as one of its constituent parts. Y is different from a consciousness plus X because Y has neither consciousness nor X as one of its constituent parts. Since 1, a consciousness plus X is identical to a perception of X, and 2, a consciousness plus Y is identical to a perception of Y, and 3, X is different from a consciousness plus X because X does not have consciousness as one of its constituent parts, and 4, Y is different from a consciousness plus Y because Y does not have consciousness as one of its constituent parts. It therefore follows that X is different from a perception of X, and that Y is different from a perception of Y. But this entails that for any perceptual state P is not a perception of P, i.e. no perceptual state its own perceptum, or identical to its no perceptual state is identical to what is it a perception of, whatever it is a perception of. In the same article, Moore also offers another argument against idealism, because he says idealists always identify the perceptual state with what it's a perception of, and only subjectivists do that. I'm kidding. If X is identical to a perception of X, then X is identical to consciousness plus X. If X is identical to consciousness plus X, then X is identical to, quote, a part of the whole of which it is a part, end quote. That's more. And this is contradictory. Indeed, X would be identical to something which was other than itself. Therefore, X cannot be identical to a perception of X. And at the bottom, Bertrand Russell gives a very similar argument, which I think might get this across even further. And it's the last, it's the very, very, very last quote at the bottom of the page. And all that we need is just the this one part right here. And I'll just copy and paste this into the main stage chat. Okay, here we go. Okay. Whoops. Okay.
Detroyer, you said you had to go soon. There's a couple questions. I know audience.
Yeah, I can stay another 10 minutes or so. I did want to comment on this briefly, but if you want questions.
Do you mind? Nirvana
Yeah,
wanted
sure.
to know if this was similar to the homunculus fallacy, which I've never heard of, but it says here on Wiki, it's the argument, it's an informal fallacy whereby a concept is explained in terms of the concept itself. I don't know if you have a comment on
Similar,
that.
but a bit different.
Well, that might generate another sort of regress or circularity to it, if that's what's going on. But it's, at best there's some sort of structural similarity between that and the alleged problem of this.
Mm.
Yeah, good point. Good Faith would like to know what Detroyer's argument against P being necessarily distinct from O is. Assume there's an is in there too. Go
Being
ahead.
necessarily distinct from O. Well, if you want to say that P and O are necessarily distinct, there should be some contradiction, or whatever modality we're speaking in. There's some it's unsatisfiable with such that modality that P is identical with O. And it could be that there is some logical problem or some problem in some other modality. But I'm not convinced. In fact, I think there are. So, just looking logically speaking, like prima facie, I think there's reason to think that there is no such contradiction, because if there were, blah blah blah, we would find it. But I mean, this some of these arguments or some others might point it out that I'm missing it. The other thing I would want to say is I think I have independent reason for thinking that the identity theory is true, or at least, in fact, I wouldn't even go so far as to say even require talking about identity theory. I think there are other things that are plausibly true that would generate the same sort of problem if this were a genuine problem that would rule them out too. And so, yeah. So I don't want to. I'm not going to assume at the outset that there's no logical problem here. I just think, because obviously there could be some problem that I'm missing. Maybe some of the arguments here, my responses to are inadequate, or I'm not getting it somehow. It's possible. I just think, for me personally, absent some good motivation for thinking there is some logical metaphysical possibility, that's prima facie some good reason to think that there isn't. Because there's some expectation that if there were, we'd be able to figure it out and so on. And the other consideration, like that the identity theory and related, although not so related things, would be ruled out. I think shouldn't be ruled out. Was that an answer to the problem or a question? Because I think that was
sounded like one to me. So
yeah.
I think also, before you go, so this is Russell's argument that he gives. This one is summarized by someone else. I mean, the full argument's at the bottom of the page, below the 73 other sources that I give. Again, I'm a bit slick there. So
Zep would like to know if we take perception to be interchangeable with sensation, or are they distinct? If they are distinct,
they're
would
distinct.
Perception...
Yeah, they are.
The sensation does not entail that there's like an objective sensation. Usually, I mean, there's some people in philosophy of mind or perception that will want to say that all mental states are like intentional, and if you want to say even stronger than that, they're all perceptual. I don't know anyone who says that, but I definitely
everything
wouldn't
reduces
say that.
down to perception.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I have heard
definitely...
that. He wanted also to know, sorry, just before we continue, it's
Sure.
great, if they are distinct, would perception be, as N.R. Hansen thinks, made up of sensation and abstraction?
Sensation plus abstraction.
Well, it depends upon what you mean by abstraction. Like using categories, well, yeah. I mean, I think it's
concept formation,
like some kind of like structure, like let's see.
Yeah, I think so. My thoughts on perception are kind of complex, and I don't really want to get into this here. I don't think that would be sufficient. I think there are certain external features that have to be satisfied for it to be a genuine case of perception. But I did want to say something that maybe is relevant to the root of the disagreement before I go. When we're in the statements that we were considering, for example, let me scroll up. When A is a perception of A, the is in that sentence and in all of the ones derived from it is going to be a predication. The identity statement is going to be between A and A, right? And you can also say, strictly speaking, if you want to speak in the extensional context where you talk about perception of A, well, a perception of A is not going to be identical with A, right?
Well, that's the whole point at issue.
No.
There's statements of identity.
Well, but a perception of A is not an object, though, right?
What? That's the... wait, so you admit that?
No. I'm admitting that a perception of A is not an object, of course.
Well, I mean, you're saying that. I mean, you're saying that it's not
I'm saying that A can be a perceptual state of itself. Of course, right?
And then
What
what does that mean when it is a perceptual state of itself? Is it not identical to
A is
perception of A?
identical to itself, and
And
it's
when it is a perception, when it's being perceived by itself, it's identical to a perception of A, right? I mean,
it's
because
identical
that's
to.
what.
So look, it's identical to something which is a perception of A.
So it's, but A, yeah, I mean, you see that you're admitting that there's an identity relation between the two.
No,
You picked
but
a very strange time to bring up the self-reference problem right as you're about to get off.
I don't think it's necessarily a problem of self-reference. I think it's this problem in how we're referring to these things, right? So, of course, it is true of A that it is a perception of A. And then if you want to say, wait a minute, but then is A identical to a perception of A? Well, no, right? Depending if you're interpreting that statement as saying something like a perception of A is this like object, and that object is identical with A. No, that's of course false because that's not even well formed. But it is if we're reading this in the following sort of way, that A is identical to something which is a perceptual state of A, or the perceptum of A, however I phrased it, because it's going to be true for both of them. Then of course that's true because the thing which is the perceptual state of A or the perceptum of A, whatever, is itself A, and A is identical with A. So I guess for follow up, because I should really go. For the next conversation, I guess we should really work through the language here and how it's references working and which sort of identity statements are true. And how the is being used as it is a predication or identity. Because I think
we could do that.
Yeah, because I think something is going on that, like, for me, it just seems obviously benign, and you doesn't. And I think we might be reading it in different ways with respect to some of these considerations. But maybe that's wrong. That's just my initial thoughts. I think about this.
Well, thank you so much, Detroyer. It's probably a good place to wrap it up. And just real quick, what did you want us to look into for the next time? Because I've been making notes here. I've got, can A be a perceptual state of itself?
Yeah, so that's the sort of claim it issue. Like, we're considering whether there's reasons to reject or accept it. And when I want to think more about some of these statements, like A is a perceptual state of A, what exactly are we saying there? Right? Because if all we're saying, because you might want to say, is there, for example, an is of identity or predication, right? Where identity is saying that the thing flanking it on the left side and the other thing flanking on the right are such that they're the very same thing. A predication, what you're saying is the thing when you say that A is B. B is essentially operating there as a predicate, or something you're saying is true of A. And I think for all these statements, I'm interpreting it in the latter sense. And I think it's sort of malformed in the former sense. The only identity relationships are going to be between A and A. And of course, you can have different ways to refer to A and say that the object of that statement is identical with, the object of another, right? So, for example, I can say the current president of the United States is identical with Joe Biden. Of course, what I'm saying there is not that there's an identity relationship between quote unquote current
Joe
president of the
Biden
United
has
States.
The property of being the president. So
yeah. What I'm saying that the extension of that first phrase, which happens to be that particular person, is the same person as Joe Biden. And I'm not saying something stronger about there being this identity relation between, whatever the current president of the United States, that sentence means. Like, that's not even well formed.
And this is
Those
where
three objects.
Bertrand Russell comes in, where he's talking about parts of propositions. This is what another concern that I had. So in order to understand this proposition, we have to understand this
Just
other
hang
part
on. I know you're really excited,
Yeah.
but I don't want to keep.
Yeah, I think that's a
feel
good
bad
place to
when
end
we
up,
keep
because-
people on forever. But thanks for
Sure.
joining, Detroyer, and please come to the next one. Looking forward to whenever that happens. PI, would you like to continue your lecture? I would love to hear it.
I mean, I'm like, if we want to wrap up here, I'm all fine and good.
Well, thanks for the discussion. Yeah, we
I
definitely
appreciate it.
definitely more to talk about it, and we'll continue another time. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So appreciate you guys, everybody showing up tonight. Appreciate everybody who was interested in the discussion between pessimistic idealism and Detroyer. I'm going to open up the requests to speak now, and if anybody wants to hop up and start a conversation, we can go into the post discussion. I'm not going to be able to stay in chat because, like I said, I was supposed to be up here a lot longer, but I got kind of tied into something, unfortunately. But yeah, I thought the discussion was extremely interesting, and I was very engaged with what was going on. So appreciate you, gentlemen and gentlewomen. Thank you, Miss Jen, for recording. Thank the audience for bringing questions. Anyway, so we're going to go into the post show.
My slumber when he said when he started talking about identity.
Yeah, there's nothing like a reference to self-reference to get me all excited.
Because the whole identity thing, that's like I was talking about. It's like, no, you can't have A being identical with a perception of A unless.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but are
you
you saying that your beliefs basically solves this infinite regress problem of thoughts having no origin?
To be
You're not
honest,
saying-
I totally disagree with this entire theory of perception.
So are you admitting that so you just said that he woke you up out of your slumber? Are you saying that Detroyer woke you up out of your dogmatic slumber?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say dogmatic slumber, but I was like, yeah, that'll sound bad on my part, so I want to say, yeah.
So
like,
you concede that Detroyer red pilled you out of your dogmatic slumber.
I have
Well,
fully embraced that.
We gotta let him know this.
Oh yeah, we must. But yeah, I think there's the 4 arguments that I have, and then there's the 74 experts. They're like, okay, this has been going on for thousands of years.
So
And-
pessimistic.
yeah,
did you hear any response from him outside of like kind of like a prima facie adherence to his biases towards identity theory? Like I didn't really. This seems so intuitively obvious.
Yeah.
The idea that
I think it just seems. Well, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think so. It seems fine to me. That seems.
I would.
And of course, what can I do in such a situation? I can't really do anything.
Well, can you steelman like what even would be? Because I have trouble even thinking of an objection that would be coherent.
One of my problems was I don't think he was familiar with the whole literature behind this. That's why I have all those experts at the bottom. Like, for example, I think to really get this across, let me pull up the, am I able to share my screen here? No, I'm not.
What we can do is share whatever is in the chat, and I can just keep it frozen there until you say to advance to the next slide.
Interesting. Well, I'm okay. I guess I'm okay. So I guess we do have that link to my shit on the thing. Let me just post it again, just so in case it doesn't get lost. I'll post this, and if you want to pin it or anything, I don't know what, feel free. Let me go up here. So I know Quantum, he's not here at the moment, but he was actually very curious about these. So these are philosophers and other people too. Let me actually go to Donald Hoffman, because he hits the nail on the head. I don't like Donald Hoffman, but I think he gets this across really well. Let me find this. Let me find what he says here. Abelson. Okay, let me forget it. Let me just go down the line. Okay. So first one, quote, "The great service of More's refutation of idealism is to insist on the truism that when you perceive something, and that what you do perceive cannot be the same as the perception of it." That's C.D. Broad, Perception, Physics, and Reality, page 5. Quote, "Experiences are intrinsically intentional. Their being is constituted by the being of something else." Intentionality in the Cambridge Handbook of Consciousness, 72. Quote, "No perceptive state ever perceives itself." A.E. Taylor, Elements of Metaphysics, page 79. Quote, "One may be tempted, as always, to identify the conditions for knowing a fact, i.e. the evidence, with the fact itself, and so to conclude that a dream is just the experience of remembering a dream, and that remembering it is identical with sincerely telling it. But such temptations should be resisted. As G.E. Moore noted long ago in his Refutation of Idealism, the perception of phi must be distinguished from phi itself, or else the perception would not be a perception of something, and thus not a perception at all. Nor can a perception be of itself, on pain of an infinite and vicious regress. That's Abelson, Persons, A Study in Philosophical Psychology. Quote, "A perception is necessarily a perception of something, and this something cannot be one with the perception. If I suspend the difference between the perception and the content of perception, then I suspend perception itself." That's Phelan, A Criticism of Subjectivism in its Various Forms, with special reference to transcendental philosophy. Consciousness is different from its object. The idealist fails to see that they are distinct. I guess Detroyer's an idealist with me. Hey, how nice. That they
Well,
are two at all. Yeah.
but I'm trying to think because I'm on the same page, and this all seems, like I said, very intuitively obvious. He seemed to say that there would need to be a contradiction, and again, it just seems obvious that it would be that you are both perceiving something and not perceiving something. So, I mean, isn't that a straightforward contradiction, easily
It's,
derivable?
I think just the fact that A would have to be greater than and less than. It's less than.
I'm sorry, it's a
negative.
contradiction to a cause cannot be its effect.
Exactly. It must be its own
Okay.
cause. And
I mean,
It
that's
isn't
but-
really a contradiction so much as an axiomatic violation for reasonable causal axioms. Whether that's a contradiction is sort of a semantic question.
Yeah.
Well, but wasn't he trying to collapse the two, right? Wasn't he saying there's something intrinsic to identity theory that would collapse the distinction?
I didn't recall hearing that. He might have said something along those lines.
Well,
But
because how else would you wiggle out of there being this contradiction, right?
He could only say,
Without
well,
saying,
it's identical to itself. It's the same as itself, so no problem. That's like what it seemed to be the. I don't see if it's. I don't know if he's contemplated this issue that much. That's the problem.
and like what would even be the
I don't know what it would even be like to have.
yeah,
such
what would be the ontology, or even like the, it just seems so odd, right? I mean, I guess on like a hardcore idealist view, it's all just collapsed upon itself, since it's all mind, and somehow it's
personally,
inherent.
I don't even. Go on.
Just that it's inherent to hardcore idealism that if it's all ontologically contained within the same like structure or states, that necessarily they would all be identical in some kind of like ontological way.
Let's see. I'll come back. Let's come back to that, because I think there's some difficulties there. But let's see here. Let me let me keep going, because I think what you were saying is um has some interesting ideas, but let's keep going. Let's see here. The analysis of perception begun by Mr. G.E. Moore consists of the separation of the perception into the object of which we are conscious, and the consciousness of the object. Any experience whatever, which may be termed mental experience, is characterized by a fundamental distinction between what is experienced and the act of experiencing. In all mental experience, there is this polarization. The two poles representing fundamental distinctions of every experience. The something experienced is always other than the mind which experiences it. It may be variously termed a thing, an object, a perceptum. Experience differs only with reference to the perceptum. Such are the two elements present in everyday experience. Next. This is A.E. Taylor here, Elements of Metaphysics 79 to 80. And he states the obvious. Quote, "We cannot too strongly insist that there is never a cognitive state which is its own object. There is no such thing, and it is a psychological impossibility that there should be any such a thing as a cognitive state having itself for its own object. Every cognitive state has for its object something other than itself. Even where I make an assertion about my subjective condition, as when I say, I know I am very angry, the state of knowing about my feeling is as distinct from the feeling itself as the state of knowing that I see red is from the red color that I see. What the subjectivist does is confuse the two, because the act of knowing is itself a state of the knowing subject. And because, in some cases, the knowledge may again have reference to some other state of the same subject, he infers that what I know at any moment is my own subjective condition in the act of knowing. In other and more technical words, he confuses the cognitive act or state with its own object. To what absurd results this confusion would lead him, if he were logical in the inferences he makes from it, we have already seen. We can now see that psychologically the confusion is a double one. 1. The subjectivist confuses experience with mere awareness of a presented content. He ignores the presence of the true subjective factor of selective attention throughout experience, and is thus led to forget that all experiences imply an element which is in the experiencing mind, but which is not present to it. And 2. And in confusing his attention with the fact of its presentation. And in confusing his attention to the presentational aspect of experience, he goes on to confound the presented content with the fact of its presentation. As against this second confusion, it is essential to a true theory of knowledge to emphasize 3 points of distinction between the presented content or object of a cognitive state and the state itself, considered as a process in the history of an experiencing subject. 1. The cognitive state is never its own object. It refers to or cognizes an object distinct from its own existence as a psychical occurrence. 2. The object of knowledge is never created by the occurrence of the psychical state in which a particular percipient becomes aware of its existence. Let's see here. And then let me find another good one. This is Arthur Schopenhauer. Go on.
Real quick here. Wouldn't this just kind of hinge on Detroyer's like where he stands on the self? Because if he's a hardcore physicalist and believes in some type of user illusion,
this is why I have to modernize, or quote unquote modernize everything. By get rid of the self, get rid of the subject, get rid of all that stuff, and then just talk about perceptual states. Unfortunately, I have to do that. I have to make the argument as weak as possible in order to appeal to these people without being accused of begging the question.
Does the semantics of perceptual states somehow completely avoid the self?
Unfortunately, I have to treat it that way in order to appease them.
Well, I just wonder if like that is the thing by which he's able to, in his mind, coherently collapse these distinctions, right? Like if there is no self and if there is no perceiver, it would be a much easier jump to say that the perception and the act of perceiving are identical.
Right. Unfortunately, you have to either I get accused of begging the question by inputting the subject, which up until very recently was considered as essential as I don't know what. I mean, like the obvious, which I still think it's obvious. It's an obvious fact. Um, that's why again, I myself totally disagree with the very theory of perception that I'm outlining here. But on my theory of perception, it's an idealistic one. It's much. I mean, it bypasses the whole issue altogether. The issues that I have with identity theory. I mean, essentially, my own theory of the matter, which is not fully developed. It's essentially it does not land me in these problems. That it doesn't land me in a physicalism. It doesn't land me in any kind of identity theory.
So
It
what would
doesn't
you
even.
say is the essential problem in physicalism?
Well, it depends on what we mean by physicalism. If we mean explanations, then it can't get off the ground explanation-wise because it involves vicious circularity. If we talk about physicalism as just a theory, I would say that it eliminates the subject essentially, and it misconstrues the nature of experience and either reduces it to mere qualia or mere feelings. It fails to take into the fact that experience has a self-transcendent aspect. The fact that there is it does not have like boundaries in the sense of like physical objects have boundaries. Also, too, I would say it has certain properties which are I don't argue for this, but it seems what's the word? It has certain properties which material things, material objects, discrete objects, or processes just do not themselves possess as elements found within experience. It's I actually, to be honest, I have much more empathy with the earliest materialists, like Democritus or Leucippus or people like that. I find their theories much more palatable than anything you can see in current day academia.
Do
At
you think the
least
mereological nihilists have a point? And if so, does it need to be addressed?
with physicalism?
I'm just asking if you think that the mereological nihilists have a point, and if so, do you align with them, or do you feel it's a problem that needs to be addressed?
Well, it depends. So let's see here. For me, I would say that the composition of material objects, it is in some sense, it's ideal in the sense that it does not have. They are in some sense constructions, but they are not essentially things arranged like atoms or. I wouldn't really say that. I think it has its own process. So, I mean, I don't really know too much about mereological nihilism to.
It's a restating of the binding problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know what
dig down to an essential essence. It's maybe akin to the deep grain quote paradox.
I think it's more of a physics question at this point, right? And like the interactions of humans and simples, and whether or not man is the measure of all things in that regard. I think that's where the debate tends to go.
What I was trying to say is that things like the heat problem point to mereological nihilism. I want to know if you see that as something that needs to be acknowledged or addressed or sort of.
I would say, yeah. I think that it's something that should be problems with that should be addressed. especially like problems with the one and the many. How is it possible for something to retain its identity amidst its differences? How is something able to and I think experience, the structure of experience itself provides some insights into that.
Jan, are you a mereological nihilist?
I'm a fundamental non-dualist, so if those are the same thing, then sure. Always hesitant to take on labels, but
Yeah,
there is
I mean,
such a thing as the binding problem. So that's kind of what I want to point to, is just that instantiating boundary for the purposes of a theory is a non-trivial undertaking. That's all I'm trying to get at. But thanks for the question.
I would like to ask a question after this discussion.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sep.
Okay. Pessimistic idealism.
Yes.
I don't really have much of a stake or interest in these ontological positions about materialism, idealism, physicalism, or anything like that. But Quantum Phone asked me to ask this, put this definition of the physical, or physicalness, or physicality, to your attention. See what you think. All right?
Is
So I'm
this the
gonna
one about
post it here.
causality?
So I'm gonna post it in the main stage chat.
Sure.
All right, so it just basically says something is physical if and only if there is a world and Z causally interacts in it.
Then I think it's a bit too vague. I think it's a bit. Many theories can. I mean, dualism, like substance dualism, that
Right.
like material objects causally interact with mind according to them. But some substance dualists would maintain that. Emergentists, they maintain that. Yeah,
All right.
neutral monists, they maintain. So anyone that maintains a causal relation, or like for example, someone like David Hume, he would fall under this as well, because
Right.
he maintained that causality was a determination of the mind, a causal relation being something at which we impose upon sensibles, and in this case, he would be a physicalist, but I just don't think that's the case. He's a phenomenological phenomenalist idealist. And so I think it's a bit too indeterminate.
It seems that some would take like physicalism, like maybe like the word physicalism and physicalist. I'm not going to argue about what it should mean, but when I hear people describe stuff as physical, right? It, to me at least, it would seem more useful to try and keep distinct something being material or being matter, and then something being physical.
Sure, I mean, yeah, that's usually something which is brought up a lot nowadays, especially with like like a materialist, like in the old sense. I mean, it's kind of interesting. There's like 17 different theories that I've seen. Like, so you got Calvin, you got who else? You got oh my God, I'm of course I have to blank on all of these. Um, what's the guy's name? Boscovich, all of these other theories of like vortex rings. You got what else? You got other kinds of particle theories. Like I mean, there's many different theories of matter. Let me
Sounds like fun.
You know what? I'll be right back. Let me just grab my phone.
Okay.
So, Seth, what did you think of the conversation earlier with Euler?
See
Quite
here.
the
I have some
intelligent
pictures.
Oh, there he is. Are you back already?
Yes, I am. Let's see here.
I like talks with Euler.
Let's see here. So here's a few definitions. This is from a book. What's it called? I think The Properties of Matter. That's what it's called. It's an old book, but this is a good passage. Quote, numberless definitions of matter have been proposed. Here are a few of the more important. 1. That which possesses inertia. 2. The receptacle or vehicle of energy. 3. Whatever exerts or can be acted on by force. 4. Whatever can be perceived by our senses, especially the sense of touch. This is closely akin to the well-known definition of matter as permanent possibility of sensation. I wish things were as simple as that. Of course, everything has to be so damn complicated now. 5. Whatever can occupy space. 6. Whatever, in virtue of its motion, possesses energy. 7. Whatever, to set it in motion, requires the expenditure of work. 8. La materia ultra... No, okay, forget that. 9. The vortex hypothesis of Lord Kelvin, the rotating parts of an inert perfect fluid, whose motion is absolutely continuous, which fills all space, but which is, when not rotating, absolutely unperceived by our senses. 11. Surfaces of misfit in granular medium. Hypothesis of Osborne-Reynolds. What's that, 13 now? Loci of intrinsic rotational strain in the ether. That's the hypothesis of Lamore. 14. Fundamentally of electric constitution. That's Thomson and Kelvin. It should be noted that Lamore, as pointed out, the vortex hypothesis gives no account of electric action. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, this is like...
That's nice.
There's
so
so much
which
shit.
is this? Which document is this?
Let me post it in chat.
Thank you.
Let's see here. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Let's see here.
So you
Hey,
said that there was
Victoria.
something vague. You said that there was something vague in what I posted. So, just let me know real quick, and I'll be finished. Which part of what I wrote was vague?
The fact that it's too broad. Well, let me put it this way: it's too broad that it makes everything. Makes typically non-physicalist theories physicalist. So it's anyone that maintains that there's relations of causality would be a physicalist.
Okay, so I would have to qualify what I'm writing
Right.
here. Okay,
Right.
All right,
That's
thank
what I would
Maybe you
say.
could say the definition is unfalsifiable and therefore untestable, because I heard Quantum before say it just means things have law-like properties, and that's so vague that it's unfalsifiable, perhaps?
I mean,
feel like that's
quantum,
what
he
we're
holds,
beginning
yeah,
of
whatever.
every theoretical definition is going to be unfalsifiable, but just because they're
right,
used
but in science, the definitions are supposed to make valid predictions, right? So unfalsifiable is not the end of the world as long as it makes predictions.
I think it's the principles, like the principles of a scientific theory are supposed to enable us to make predictions, not the definitions.
You're going to give me an accounting for
Definitions are
science
just-
now? Is that right?
Like theoretical definitions are just there to allow us to sometimes give us more shorter notation, so we could substitute longer expressions for shorter ones. But like it's the principles of a scientific theory, like the principles of relativity theory, that would enable us to give us the ability to like make predictions or explain.
And what are those principles exactly?
There's two of them. I can't remember them off the top of my head. All I know is that there's two. Sorry about that.
It's not a
But
good
okay,
sign.
I'm done. What?
Yeah, so Daryl says science is not about testable predictions. It's like account for science. Because a lot of people, when they try to give an accounting for science, this isn't directed at anyone in particular, this is an observation.
Right.
What they tend to point to is technological achievements. And it's like, that is awesome. But that doesn't actually speak to why science works. Technology is implementation and engineering. That's applied science. How do we get to the point where we can do that? That's what science is. Go ahead.
According to Paul Thagard, he has a
what?
list.
No, just kidding.
According to Paul Thagard, from his book Computational Philosophy of Science, he has a like unlike Popper, who just gave like one criterion for science, he gives an entire list one of which is the testability of a theory, but also the fruitfulness of a research program, like sort of like what you were talking about, sort of what inventions or technological applications it will enable. Also, unifying, like if there's any way to unify certain scientific theories, that's also a criteria. Simplicity, also the simplicity in the expressions of the theory, that's also a criteria. There's a list of such with that, and his has been like, I don't think anyone's actually outdone Thagard. I think according to McIntyre, I forget, is it Scott McIntyre? I forget his first name. Ian McIntyre, one of those two. He writes in his book, The Scientific Attitude, that kind of the demarcation problem in philosophy of science is kind of passe now. But yeah, like when it was a thing, like Paul Thagard's answer to it was just like, was like the height of it. He's like famous now. He's like the major, like one of the main editors of the Handbook of Philosophy of Science, published from Elsevier now. Like he's got this like nice perch, in the scene in philosophy of science. He's like, the big kind of like gatekeeper there, if you will. Like, it's nice of content.
Carol says science is the goal of finding a valid and consistent explanation of some aspect of nature. No, it's not. It's sound explanations, which ideally fit a list of well-defined criteria. Given the initial conditions, you can deduce the later conditions of a system, aka regions of motion. And to try to say that it's something else is to piss into the well that made the technology you're currently working on.
I think science has. A goal of finding explanations for aspects, but it's not the only goal. All right, thank you.
What I'm trying to stay on the topic of is accounting for the success of science. Because if you want to push forward, you can emulate what caused science to succeed where it did. That involves Pessimistic that it's a partial success right now. Sorry. It's not a perfect. A lot of people want to say it's a perfect explanation. That's stopping us from progressing things forward meaningfully because it's not perfect. Yeah, it was a great job. It's not perfect, obviously, if that's even possible. We can do better.
All right, I'm gonna take off now.
But well, thanks. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, so just all these buzzwords tells me you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, dude.
So, pessimistic idealism? Mm-hmm. What is pessimistic about your idealism?
Can't you tell by the little Huddy picture?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, never mind. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
let's see.
So as
basically,
an idealist,
all my enemies are in power, and all my heroes are dead.
Okay, so all the non-idealists are part of some cabal that are suppressing idealism or something like that.
We got eternal Anglos like Bertrand Russell. He's still around,
Oh, okay.
E. Moore's still around too. He's like pulling the strings.
Are you saying we're being haunted by his ghost as we speak? And everyone's just secretly dying to bring up the inclusion paradox.
All of the idealists, like all of them, died in very quick succession. But Bertrand Russell lived to be like a fucking 1,000 years old. I think he was living off their blood.
Hmm.
You know what, too? Like, another thing, too. Yeah, I mean, flat earthers, they're idiots. Obviously, the earth is curved. It's fucking concave. That's something like that people really need to acknowledge.
Wow. How did we get there?
Yeah.
to
No, I'm
to
just
flat
so
Earth.
I'm fucking kidding. Yeah, a bit too much to drink. I'm like,
Oh, okay,
this
okay,
Detroyer
okay.
stuff. It's like really like, ugh.
I could tell it was a joke and I was laughing, but I was muted. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, it's a fucking. Yeah, of course it's not fucking flat. It's fucking concave. It's yeah.
Okay.
So
So I have a question. As an idealist, you say that everything, all of phenomena, is mind, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Oh no, there's no gotcha here. There's no. I'm
I know,
just
I know.
asking.
I'm like, okay, yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, like, I'm just trying to get an idea. And so, where do you go with that? I just want to know, as that metaphysical launch pad, where do you go with that morally, epistemically, all the rest of it? What comes out of that?
I would say that it does give you a very cheerful view of life. Of course, I'm a moral realist. I think moral anti-realism in the sense of like, I think it's kind of silly. But let's see what else. I believe values are like objective, but by objective, I have a different view of objectivity. I use like an old view that's like the old meanings of the words before everything got switched around in the early 20th century. What else? Yeah, reality consists in a system of meanings. Physical objects, unities of meaning, each have their own tone or shape. They are nothing outside of actual and possible experience, or knowledge, rather, or thought. Thought can penetrate anything. But there's always more to know. So essentially, knowledge, thought, it's always on a nisus towards a whole. It's always progressing towards like absolute knowing. Now, whether or not it gets there, I have no fucking clue. But it's always moving forward towards absolute systematicity, absolute system. That's like what truth is, a system.
Does it have any
concrete.
connection to consciousness? This is an audience question, by the way.
Sure.
Idealism's related to consciousness at all?
Yes. I would maintain that meanings are essentially functions within consciousness, within experience. They're kind of like aspects, as it were, kind of like almost like flavors.
This
within
happened a little
experience.
while ago, so Parmenides asks if you're talking about the Cambridge Platonists.
So I'm talking about let's see, depends on. So I'm talking about a bit after that. I'm talking about the British idealists mainly. The British idealists were a school or movement that really took place in the mid 19th century and into the early 20th century. So like the Cambridge Platonists, I mean, they're related, but they're a bit less so. They're kind of cool though. Let's see. I need to look more into them, to be honest, because they're kind of cool. I know Coleridge was one. I think he was one. Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost certain he was.
That's all the audience questions if either of the other
Yes.
panelists want to take over at this point.
Wait, you're here, Quantum. Hey.
Hello.
Wait a minute, I thought you were voice blind. How'd you know it was Quantum?
Because he has that high-pitched voice that sounds kind of like me.
Oh.
I have that really annoying voice that everyone knows. Everyone hates me when I show
You
up.
break through
They're
it.
like, oh my god, this guy.
I
I
can't
have a
believe
very
you have
punchable
kids.
voice.
You sound like me.
Yeah. I'm an old dude. I'm like
Oh,
20
really?
now. I'm almost 30. I'm gonna be 30 soon.
Oh,
So.
well, that's not that bad. I thought. Yeah.
Not 30
Someone
old.
at work thought I was like I looked like I wasn't a day over 15. I kind of got creeped out.
Yeah, I look pretty much like I'm 12 too, but
That's weird. Your
yeah,
kids look like they're like older than you.
yeah.
Weird.
Detroyer got owned. Detroyer got owned so hard. No, I'm just kidding. He started to get the right idea at the end there. It's kind of disappointing.
Yes, it's like, wait a second. That's it. That you finally fucking get it. It's.
I look forward to the part 2.
And then
Somebody
he was
should
like,
like.
I gotta go. Like,
That's what Detroyer does. He says a lot.
yeah, it's like abandoned ship.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is like, so I think I do understand why your argument is wrong now, but that's
Why? I don't.
yeah.
So I think you kept on confusing premise 2 and premise 3. I think
No,
your real gripe is with premise 3.
Gone. What? Yeah, I think premise 2 was false because I think.
But you've been agreeing with, like, you're saying so it is, or it's
No.
not.
I'll agree that like a perceptual state being its own object is just impossible, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say I agree with that, and so that state just doesn't exist anywhere.
Okay.
So like that doesn't need to correspond to some brain state or some possible brain state because that's not even possible. Like we're agreeing it's like not even logically possible. So like why is it a problem for identity theory then? Like
The problem is all of my brain states are in principle perceptible.
sure, yeah, right. But we're agreeing that like this case is not one of those. It can't
I
be,
can
right?
perceive my brain state right now.
No, but you can't though. That's the point.
You'd be
right?
begging the question. To say
No, what do you
that,
mean?
you'd be begging the question. I'm saying it's logically possible, or it's metaphysically possible, rather, that I can perceive all of my brain states. All I need
Sure.
are just my
Right,
optic
yeah.
nerves.
No, but that's
extended,
fine though, right? Like,
but
you can still say that.
but that would mean that none of my present perceptual states are identical to those brain states, which I'm currently perceiving.
No, that's not true, right?
What? I don't know about that.
That part doesn't follow. This is the part where it doesn't follow. No, because listen, none of the brain states are, and none of the perceptual states are the case of it being its own object of perception. That much is true, right?
All it means that what I'm perceiving cannot be identical with my perception of it. If that's the case, then if I'm perceiving all of my brain states right now, none of my brain states right now are identical to my perceptual state. If that's the case, then there is a perceptual state which is not identical to my current perceptual state, is not identical to any of my current brain states. If that's the case, then identity theory is false.
No, but okay, but listen, right? So
and that
I'm
follows logically.
No, there's part of it there's part of it in the middle there that's getting confused, right? Or at least at the beginning of the first conditional that you said, right? The antecedent was like assuming the thing that we just said wasn't possible, right?
And you're saying that the brain states.
Yeah.
What you're saying is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that no perceptual state can be its own object. Okay? And we agree with that for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
Now, at time t1, I can perceive all of my brain states at t1. There's nothing metaphysically impossible about it. It's metaphysically possible. Now.
But maybe it isn't, right? Like, so.
Okay. Well, if we're going to be like Wait.
Well,
Wait. What?
we don't know what the metaphysics of brain states are.
Oh
right?
my god! Come on.
Well,
It's
if we were saying it about anything else, like if you're saying it's logically impossible, right? Then why are you saying it's metaphysically possible for brain states?
well, we could say either. I mean, metaphysical. Sure, we could. Let's say we
I
could
just
say
don't
it's either.
see-
It doesn't really matter here. It's.
I don't see where the openness to that is coming from if we're agreeing that it's like that much of an issue.
Okay.
Like I would
let me go
say-
back to my article so I could just read off the thing, and because it'll make things much clearer. Okay. If the identity theory is true, then all of John's perceptual states are identical to some of John's brain states. Premise 2. If all of John's perceptual states are identical to some of John's brain states, then not all of John's brain states can, in principle, be the percepta of John's perceptual states. Premise 3. All of John's brain states can, in principle, be the percepta of John's perceptual states.
Well, hold on a second, though. I mean, look. They just don't have
So
to
it's
be
by
like,
Leibniz's law, essentially.
No. I think
on here.
there's still like sort of like a combination like question here, because like you could just say that like in order to have like your brain state be an object of perception, right? That the perceptual state can't be identical with that particular brain state. And so, but you could still say that they are perceptible, right? And this is just going to break the identity relation between them. So it's like there's no reason.
Still mean there's a perceptual state that's not identical to any of the brain states at that time.
No, it's not though, because what it's saying is it's to say something like you're saying you can have an immediate, like such an immediate perception that like to me, like you're saying at T1 I'm able to perceive my own brain state at T1, but like there's going to be just a lag time even just in processing that information.
Again,
like,
I go into the whole time lag argument that doesn't
but
apply because it already
consider
presupposes the existence of the perceptual state. So it's
no, because it's saying it's a different one though. That's the thing. So it's like it's I would consider like any sort of mental object, mental state in the sense of identity theory to be an object that has like temporal extension. Like I think that's sort of necessary. It's a dynamical object. It's not just like a static thing that you can slice with moments in time like that and be coherent about what you're talking about in terms of the structure of the object, right? So I don't think you're pointing to something that's saying like even the perceptual state that I'm currently having, though not being perceived by anything else at that time, could be perceived by there could be a brain state that has that as its perceptum. Like it just wouldn't be that brain state. So that's why I'm not understanding.
I think things have gotten more muddy now. I'm trying to figure out because I don't really know what
you parse that out. Someone wants to know if your profile is from Berserk, and they've asked twice.
Me?
Yeah.
No. Who's asking that? Who's asking that?
Someone in my chat on YouTube.
Wait, you have a YouTube channel? What's that? Send it to me.
Oh.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask you about a YouTube channel if you had one. That's cool.
Yeah, I think she's streaming this. I think she's been streaming.
Oh boy, I've been saying stuff that I probably shouldn't say on stream. Oh well.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta dip. Is your mic malfunctioning, dude? His mic must be broke.
Okay, so
Yep.
Who the heck would think that's a picture from Berserk? Jeez.
I wasn't gonna ask it, but they asked it twice, and I'm like, okay, they're obviously really passionate about getting
No,
this picture.
I know who they think it is. They think it's a black and white picture of guts from Berserk, and that's just like not the deal. So
Ooh, this is an egregious error. So you know.
It's an unforgivable crime against humanity. So
Parmenides asked that.
yeah, so pessimistic idealism. So you are an idealist, and you think that you're a moral realist. That triggers me. That gets me in the street with pitchforks and torches, man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But I respect you. I respect you with my pitchforks and torches. My pitchforks and torches are pitchforks and torches of love and tolerance. I'm standing outside of your house with pitchforks and torches, singing songs of tolerance.
For you, Gaspar, I will send it to your DMs.
Oh, let's not be in my DMs, okay?
Oof.
You gotta be. Yeah, I gotta. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you have a YouTube channel, Gaspar? Oh yeah, I'm subscribed.
Okay, thank you. And I think I'm already subscribed to yours.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I redid that materialism video. I got so pissed afterwards because I like fucked something up in it, and I was like, I shouldn't have used all the symbols and shit. Ugh, they just made things.
Bro, I'm so tired of everybody asking me to define material and shit. It's like
you've never defined it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Oh man, that's exactly what they say, dude. It's like, especially
like
in Gaspar's server,
being,
they're like, define this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I defined it like 5 times. And they're like, what is the definition? Like, you can't be fucking kidding me.
It's like, I guess we're all
if it gets abused, there is the Socratic fallacy.
Yeah, that's what I started to do to them. I was just like, they're like, your definition is vague. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by vague.
Yeah.
Well, and I know who you're talking about. It's Vortigern. He thinks certain things are vague. I ultimately.
It wasn't him. It was the Christians. It was not Vortigern.
Well, Vortigern says that sometimes, though. Even if you're not talking about him, like he'll say that specific ideas are vague, and actually, I don't think any ideas are more vague than any others. It's only about like what you're mapping them to and what system they are integrated into. I mean, if you think about it, if we are trying to define something and we're asked to clarify it, we're going to have to stop clarifying at some point and settle on some vagaries that people have a consensus on. And so I'm suspicious of anyone who says that any concepts or ideas are intrinsically vague. And so this is why when people ask me for too many definitions, like, well, what do you mean by this? I'll be like, I can just keep coming up with stuff, and I'm just going to wonder when you're going to nod your head and agree with me. Like, will there be a point where you stop asking me to come up with other entities for other entities,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just going to keep opening babushka dolls forever. Don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So
I wish people would kind of just be like, okay, we're going to try to understand, like, what you mean by, like, people who ask you for, like, definitions ad infinitum who are just trying to, like, pick holes in it. I hate that, because that's just, like, pointless. It's like, I'm not looking to argue with you about words and, like, it's like I'm trying to convey what I mean by this term, right? And it's like you're just refusing to understand, to try to understand what I'm saying to you, right?
Yeah. So what you're describing is one of the big problems in philosophy that isn't really talked about a lot. It's that sometimes people engage in dysfunctional intellectualizing as in a weaponized fashion when they are trying to just take something apart, and that's what it will look like from maybe our end, but from their end, we've been on their end before, and it's where we think that enthymemes or suppressed presumptions are being smuggled in, and we want to excavate those and put them front and center stage. So I'm not saying that people never do. I'm not saying people never engage in motivated reasoning, because they do. I think that's primarily what precepts do. But sometimes it's just a misunderstanding. It's one person thinks that there are enthymemes being smuggled in, and then the other person thinks that there's sketchy, shifty wordplay at hand. And so I try to be really vigilant and not let those misunderstandings persist. And that it's really difficult. But I had I've been getting along, cordially, I guess, with Jim Bob. But one thing he told me was that all people are precepts for this or that reason. And I told him, the reason I would not say that I'm a precept, despite the fact that I have presuppositions, is because although I admit that I can't back my presuppositions up, I do not compensate for this by saying that other people hold my presuppositions. And that is the fundamental difference between me and many other people and a presuppositionalist, apologist, is, they say, not only do I have my presuppositions, but you hold them too. You are just dishonest about it. Like, it's actually pretty toxic stuff, I think. And I'll say this, not all presuppositionalists are toxic, because not all of them are aware of how shifty it is. Some are unwitting.
See, this is what I'll say. So that whole thing is like Sauron's One Ring of Power. And you have to just sometimes be Boromir in the situation and just take the ring and like use it for Gondor.
No, right? Hell no. No, dude.
No one is Boromir in the first movie.
You got to be Gandalf. Do not tempt me, Frodo.
But in the first movie, Gandalf dies, and then.
Can I just read something from the audience real quick? Maybe everyone can respond to it. From Anders, maybe materialism is the same as dualism, that there is mind plus matter, energy, space, time. I think reality is non-dual. If anyone wants to talk about that.
Materialism is not generally like a substance dualist view, but it could be like a property dualist view, or like there's other kinds of dualism.
C.D. Broad has an interesting kind of dualism. It's like a materialist dualism, but there's a third thing, which he calls a psychic factor, which somehow combines with material things to yield consciousness. And this psychic factor, it persists after death indefinitely to eventually combine with other forms of matter again to generate other forms of consciousness.
That very interesting guy. Materialism. That doesn't that seems like that is like a substance dualism, but
He was the president of the Aristotelian Society for some time, as well as the Society for Psychical Research. Cool guy.
Yeah, man. Look, if people had telekinesis, I would be way more down with some shit like that. You know,
He
like if
actually
people could do that, and then the people who could do it were like, oh, you know, it's not really like throwing a baseball. It's not like, you know, you can do it right every time. Like sometimes it just misbehaves. Like, you know, and they were describing it like it was magic and stuff like this. I'd be like, okay, maybe that's real. You know, everybody's always like, what kind of evidence would you accept for this type of stuff, man? And it's like, dude, like literally show me anybody who can actually do that, then, and I'll. Not that you think that that's real. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
it's
I mean,
sort
it's
of like
possible. I mean, I don't know.
It's an interaction problem issue where it's like if there were interactions happening, like those would amount to violations in like the natural order, like apart from those things, right? It would be like, oh wow, it would just appear like there was a hole in like the expected like physical progression of events that like made no sense physically because it was this non-physical thing interfering in some way, right? But like we have just no examples of that really. So like I don't know any examples of something like that. Now, like you would just say that like I think you pretty much are like like it's weird. You're almost
Andres
like
comes out of the Wolfram crowd, so if anyone knows what he's talking about, it's him. He says, okay, materialism can only be the material, so to speak, but I still think that something material automatically implies duality since separate parts are not a single unity. If you'd care to respond to that, I thought it was interesting.
I see. So he's a pluralist, not so much a dualist.
Well, you can be a materialist, be a monist.
It just seems
I
like
mean, I don't
he's saying that materialism implies dualism. I don't know if that's actually, he can respond to it, go ahead.
I think what he might mean is this. It's numerically one, so it's numerically monistic, but qualitatively no, sorry. It's numerically pluralistic, but qualitatively monistic. So there's many things, right? Because matter is parts, but there's only matter. So it's kind of like, as opposed to there being mind and matter, it's just matter, but matter has different parts. I think that's what he means when he says
teleological thing. I would say, but like it could be like a relational issue too. Like you might be trying to say that materialism implies like a relationalism, where like there have to be, say like entities that are interacting with each other or something like that.
Recording the whole time. Oh my god. Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you knew, and then I didn't realize.
Oh no, I forgot that we were.
You couldn't hear for a while. I'm like,
no, I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine.
I thought you sounded really good, honestly. So far,
tomorrow.
Oh boy.
Where were we? Yeah, you might be saying that like materialism implies like relationalism, and then that's how you're getting some sort of dualism. But I don't know that makes sense. But
oh boy, check out the chat.
Saying that you need to wait here. Separate parts aren't a single unity, and somehow that implies duality. But yeah, I have no clue. So maybe you can explain that better.
Well, you could be like a mereological nihilist and just say that there are no like parts. Like they would say that there's only simples, and then you could literally be a monist about that too, and just say that there's one, like that there are no like parts to the world or anything like that. Like you could reject that and be a materialist still.
I think it comes down to whether you consider math to be metaphysically neutral or not.
Well, no, I mean, in the sense that there's some metaphysical account for math.
That's not what I
You
mean.
can say that much.
That's not what I mean. I mean, does math necessarily make assumptions on a metaphysical level?
No, I don't think so.
Exactly. There are people that actually believe this. So whether you believe that's going to determine, I think, the answer to the other question.
Oh, the dualism thing?
Whether materialism is necessarily dualistic first come down to this duality.
Well, why would it, like, I don't know where the dualism is coming from, right? Like, what are the two things? Like, you're saying everything is material, right? So that would be like materialism, like whatever exactly that means, right?
The assertion that everything is material cannot be asserted materially. Therefore, it is non-material. So you've already got a dualism there.
The assertion.
I wish things were that easy again. Ugh.
It's not a complete proof because most, you can sort of trivially unmake most ideologies that way, right? Like to say, oh, the world is constantly changing. Constantly changing? That's self-refuting. It's still
You said the assertion. You said the assertion isn't material.
Show me materially where you can assert that everything is material. It's not a material piece of information.
Well, okay, but I mean, a materialist would just say that everything about the assertion and like you making it and your thoughts and everything are just all material. So if there was just
I would say they haven't met the burden of proof, and I would be right.
What do you mean the burden?
It actually is impossible for them to make. I mean, they can't really do it inductively.
I don't know what burden of proof it incurs when you say like you seemed you seemed like you were making it seem like there was an incoherency in the view when you said that it was like that you couldn't account for the what was it, the statement that it's all material, like the assertion. So I just don't see how that's inconsistent.
The assertion is itself not material information. Like the atomic number of carbon, that's material information. The assertion everything is material.
Well, what is
not
it that
material
you're
observation.
Yeah,
if
but
it
the
is
point
a material observation, it is unclear how that it is compelling.
Well, if you're nailing down like what the assertion is, right? Like I don't think that they're just assertions that like exist like out there floating somewhere, right? An assertion is something that like a person like makes, right?
Okay, quantum.
What?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Listen.
What I do? What?
There is not any presupposition that you can claim that other people by default hold. Okay. If I say, I've got this presupposition, and actually you hold this presupposition too, and you deny it, that's just desperate. And there's nothing you can gain by like copying the opposition in this case. Okay, this isn't some race for who can develop the nuke first, because presup is not a nuke. It is a wasted away meth head masturbating in a sewer. Okay. It's not a badass Sith Lord with the red lightsaber who shoots lightning.
You gotta just do super presup though.
It is Gollum injecting meth into his dick veins. That's what presup is. Okay. And there's no we're gonna steal presup. It's not like how Trump stole the term fake news and flipped the script. There's none of that. Presup is garbage. Don't touch it.
Nah, man. I think like
you say Boromir. You say we need to be like Boromir. Take the ring.
Yeah.
Boromir got shot full of arrows from the Urukai.
Yeah.
And
that's fine.
Yeah, he got some poetic justice, man.
I'm
And
not saying we should all be Boromir. I'm just saying I should be Boromir.
I don't think I think you're gonna see. Try it out, man.
I'm gonna like push Frodo Baggins on his ass in the snow. Look up the rig and be like, oh man.
God.
Hey, Spooky, thanks for joining. I saw you had a question. I thought I'd ask you up on stage in case you want to just ask it on voice. Would you like to go ahead?
With the person that was asking about, like, I don't think that materialism implies dualism, but it sounded like, were they maybe sort of saying something about emergence? Like a lot of, physicalists would say, well, even though like consciousness in our view is going to be like completely reducible to like the physical substrate in a sense, it's not like a one-to-one. Like there's like sort of this combined emergence thing going on that would produce consciousness under like some physicalist view, because that would make more sense as to like what they're trying to say, I think.
Yeah, and I think like on that point, most like physicists and like physicalists, who are not all physicists obviously, but like if the ones who are listening to physicists at least, they're basically, oh man, wait, I lost the oh my god, Gaspar, I lost it. Help me.
I was talking about emergence, and you were talking about
emergence.
physicists.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's two different like kinds of emergence. There's like strong and weak emergence. In reductionism, that usually weak emergence is referring to something that you can, like, with enough information, basically understand the macro state, which is like the emergent level of the system, from all the information in the micro states, and sort of like make reductions from one level down to another. And then there's strong emergence, which is something that like most people in physics don't accept, where you're getting something that's like a brand new sort of property that is not explained at all, in terms of reduction, right? So, I mean, I don't think that materialism implies like strong emergence. So I still wouldn't say that there's like two things there. You just have like tiers of complexity. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered the question, but.
I've asked him to rephrase it because he went off on some tangent here. Imagine a boundary between X and Y, and then the boundary is a thing, and then there's yet another boundary ad infinitum. We've come back to the infinite regress problem in some form or another, alarming number of times, in just this very combo. So
maybe if you ask them to like describe like what sort of just general concept of materialism they're talking about, like.
his background's math, I think, and I asked why materialism implies dualism, and it sort of hinting at some type of Platonic argument.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it might apply to like some versions
I
of
think
it.
he's talking about implementing a computer coding language like Wolfram stuff. So let's just keep it to this philosophy of mind. Awesome discussion.
Yeah, I don't think consciousness is a computational thing at all. So there's that too.
Which is very interesting, because I would agree with you.
It's based on the Gödel incompleteness theorem. Do you want to hinge a belief on the Gödel incompleteness theorem?
No.
I'm just saying. Just leave that. Just open a crack. Just that crack of doubt, please.
No, I mean, part of the reason too is because I don't have a good reason to think that it is like a computer, and I find it like similar to when people have always thought of like automata as like that you could eventually make like a machine that was like as good as a brain or something like this, and like at different stages of technology they thought like that was kind of how it worked, right? So it was like they thought like levers and pulleys and like mechanical systems could do like the same things like a brain could, essentially. And then like people thought, okay, like steam technology, you could do it with this, right? And then it's like, oh, we have computers now. Like maybe it's like a computer, right? And I don't see it as like, I mean, hey, like from the outside, it kind of looks like they're doing more complex things that emulate like human thought, I guess, or maybe, I don't even know. But I don't think there's really any reason to think that the brain is like a computer at all. I mean, in some ways it might be. Like there might be parts of it that really are doing like computation.
Well, if we can design computers, there must be some way in which they're like us.
Well, I mean,
I just came up here to say it's Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Oh my god, it's girdle. I think I knew that. I just really don't like the word girdle. It's kind of like moist. It's just like I don't want to say it.
Nah, it's like
I just aimed at troll.
That's what you wear, a girdle. That's
yeah, it's like a soft O.
Like I'm wearing a girdle.
So,
No,
Eddie came on stage. Eddie came on stage
I
too.
forgot we're on live too. Damn. Why did I say that?
Eddie came on stage too. Actually, Jen.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, that's
actually.
it. I just wanted to be a grammar Nazi and project my knowledge.
Yeah, Pessimistic. That was pretty funny how that impression you did of Detroyer.
Sorry, Detroyer, for listening.
Here.
Yeah. Oh no, Detroyer heard all those times you took a big dump on him after he left. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, he can take a dump on it's fucking damn.
I think it was funny that time that
never listened this far in. This is like many hours into the video. There's no way he's gonna get this far.
I think it's funny that that time that he rambled on. I asked him that really simple question. So Detroyer, what are your views on morality? And like 15 minutes later of him being like, but if you have these commitments, then and then Ziz is like drunk and she's like, you're really boring.
That's what I don't. So I've never met an interesting identity theorist. It's the least creative position you could come up with.
I'm
it's
interesting.
Boring as fuck.
We should get Ziz over here.
I'm sorry, but it's like it's
not
so
boring.
like stale.
No.
You're not an identity theorist. You're like a materialist.
He is.
Your theory, the way that you hold the things, you're not. If anything,
you know what?
You're some kind of like. You're not a materialist in the typical sense of the term. You're
atypical, but
hey, pessimistic idealism.
Yes.
Identity theory. I agree. It's stale. It's low energy, is what it is.
It's Jeb Bush tier. It's Jeb Bush tier philosophy.
Well, please,
that's what it is. I bet Jeb Bush.
He's an identity theorist.
Yeah, that's what I get from these people. It's low energy. And unfortunately, it was refuted 150 years ago by F.A. Lange. It's been refuted dozens and dozens of times, but it keeps on raising its head. Please clap. Oh, come notice me. Oh, it's low energy, and they know
even though, yeah,
I like it. I think it's pretty sweet.
Even though I'm not an idealist, at least idealism is kind of spicy and triggering, and so, at least it's, dare I say, idealism, is, I don't know, controversial. Maybe
it's like this is what I don't like about identity theory. It was designed by people who bit their lip and said, "Fuck it, we're gonna go with what doesn't make sense," and they just did it. They said, "I know this opinion, this view." There's a good passage from J.B. Pratt in his it's one of his philosophy books. It's like there's no point in in arguing with these people. You can't reduce their position to the absurd. You can't argue. You can't give a reductio of their position because it's already they themselves reduced it to the absurd already. Essentially, you can't argue with a position that's already been reduced to the absurd. There's no point. You can't help someone if they can't see two things as two.
But listen,
Two distinct things as two.
Well, I came to make one more correction real quick. I think what Gaspar was trying to say is idealism is more parsimonious.
Oh, I hate the word parsimonious. I hate it. I hate when people are theoretical virtues.
I'm gonna make a
sorry.
Is that a virtue?
I'm a big fan of you, Eddie, but I'm not a fan of like the whole I'm gonna steel man this. Like I put things exactly the way I intended them on being worded.
Well, I'm.
Did you catch the trolling bug?
Yeah, I'm kind of a minimal idealist myself, so you're offending
are
me.
you trolling? You're trolling me, and I didn't catch it. So the joke is on me. Okay, I'm the idiot today.
Also, another thing too, you gotta look at the physiognomy of these people.
Dude,
Like,
I've noticed
physiognomy
that Eddie
checks.
just goes to everybody, and he's like, I totally agree with you. It's so funny. So, was everything you said to Darth Dawkins true, Eddie? Because I was like, I thought he was not in. You said you were into Van Til and Bonson, and I was like, is that true?
It was. No, well, so first of all, that was a total shill. I wasn't prepared.
That was whining and dining.
I was trying to get to the point where I gained his trust for a later debate because I've been kind of chasing him to get a debate for a while. But no, when I originally got introduced to apologetics after I was in philosophy for a little bit, Van Til and Bonson is where I started. And then there are some things Van Til says that's okay, but no, I after going through the Van Tilian and Bonson approach and having actual conversations with non-presuppositionalists, and I just started to realize how dishonest it was, and so I started to kind of rebuff it and move away from it.
So we were just saying how it's the One Ring of Sauron, and I'm gonna steal it and use it for Gondor.
I'm just telling you, man. That's like saying I'm going to use meth for good. I'm going to use meth for health purposes. No,
Hey, whoa! You can actually get prescription meth, so it is for health purposes for some people.
All right. Okay, that's fine. Then I will convert to Percept. Yeah.
You can change my name for a little while I'm here to Mr. Pedantic.
No, you're doing a good. I appreciate your trolling. You're making me mad, but I respect you for it. It's good trolling. I do it to people, so I deserve it sometimes. I deserve trolling back.
What kind of trolling going on right now? Like, it's a completely parallel discussion. They about redshifting and stuff. It's hilarious. I have to check the lunar cycle.
Yeah, the looks I'm getting while I'm in the grocery store talking about this stuff is funny.
Hashtag relatable.
Oh my God. Okay, Quantum. Look. If you want to do a stage, let's plan a stage, and you can try to run your Holy War Crusader precept on me. Okay, you think there's a Jedi precept? Why don't you test it out? Do you want to
affirm the identity theory world or the not identity theory world, sir? All facts derive and depend for their existence on either the identity theory world or the not identity theory world.
Maybe I'm just being trolled by everyone, and I'm just taking bait left and right today. That's what I'm starting to be afraid of. Am I just like
I don't
Am
know,
I just
but I've got some cognitive dissonance from Quantum's new profile pic there. Ooh, one does not simply change a profile pic like that.
one does not simply commandeer Percept. That's what he's saying.
Here's something. Look at these people, identity theorists. Look at them.
Oh my god, he's still on this.
I wouldn't
Quantum-
trust any kid with that. Like, I wouldn't trust anyone's kids with these people.
Oh
You
yeah,
got the
yeah.
you
They
got the
got the
know-it-all
pedo
kid.
glasses.
Yeah, exactly. You got the know-it-all kid up on top, and then you got that kind of weird, creepy Jeb Bush face at the bottom there. With the comb over. The comb over.
Okay.
That's bad.
Yeah. Quantum. Okay. Are you trolling about the Percept? You got this hunch that you can hijack Percept and use it for good or something. You realize anybody can do that, right?
You do
It's
it.
a weak.
Can you
It's
do
a
it if
weak.
you don't assume your own existence, bro? Can you?
Is that Detroyer?
Yes.
It's a Detroyer sexy Santa stripper.
Yes. Yeah. So Quantum. If let's say I didn't assume my own existence, I could, and I asserted that I was like, I don't assume my own existence. And if I was desperate and thought that there was something to know, that thought there was something to be had that can't be had, then I'd be like, and you also assume your non-existence, but you're just in denial of it. And I would actually do that little
but
tap
I'd be
dance.
like, but I couldn't be in denial of it if I didn't exist. Ooh. I think you just got dunked.
Simulated denial, bitch.
No.
Can't deny it. He who denied it. He who denied it.
Okay.
Just
I'm
BTFO'd
being
your own
trolled.
position with a fart joke, dude.
No, but
I just think.
listen, sometimes these words are just true.
Okay. I'm doing a real bad job of taking the bait today.
Who said it was bait?
It's your only excuse. It's me being charitable. I'm steel manning you by saying that you're trolling me, basically.
In that case, I'm not trolling at all.
Just thought of something. People become trolls when the self-reference problem comes up because nobody wants to talk about self-reference because it makes things incoherent.
I mean, I don't know.
A troll is an entity that stops you from crossing a bridge, and people want to stop crossing the bridge of their own self-reference as some type of primitive reflex.
Yeah, Gaspar, you're a troll under a bridge. Did you hear what you said?
Yes. But I'm not the troll today. I'm getting trolled. And it started with Eddie. Eddie basically came in and gave me a swirly pretty much. And then everybody thought it would be the cool thing to do. Y'all have all been ganging up on me and trolling me. And that's abuse.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to play the axiom card. Tell everyone that I've been abused, but not give any details.
Here's another correction. Abuse means to use something in a way it wasn't designed. I don't think that applies to you.
Okay. Oh, you're doing a great job, Eddie. I appreciate your trolling.
So
yeah,
pessimistic, are you saying like
wrong?
Sorry, on some level are you like picking ideology based on what its purveyors look like?
I know you're sorry.
Of course.
It's like in your, rubric, how high is that from number one position?
It's like the number one. I mean,
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
You pick them based on style.
yeah. Have you seen Charles Sanders' Purse? When he was old. Here, let's see.
Just because no one's talking, I'll answer something in the chat here. Dualism is a general thing where you're imposing some type of a boundary. That's all it means. And it has a cost energetically.
One's in chat if philosophical plebeians is better than Duvid.
Here, check the chat, main stage. Charles Sanders Peirce, objective idealist.
You know who was hot is Darwin's bulldog, Thomas Huxley.
Is that the same objective?
Oh, is that like
idealism?
There was some massive cutting out there. I don't know if it was the same for everybody.
Like Bernardo Castro.
Yeah, he's like wow, 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 wow. He sounds like R2.
Yeah, my signal's low. Am I still roboting?
Nope.
Not now.
No, I said, is that objective idealism the same?
Yeah, quite
Idealism.
different. Quite different. It's yeah, pretty different. Let's see, who else do we got?
Is that your nice way of
look,
saying
David,
that was a stupid
what's that?
question?
What's
I said, was
what-
that your nice way of saying that was a stupid question?
No, not at all. I mean, it's different. It's just a really different theory. Let's see here. Also, too, get a load at D.M. Armstrong, David Armstrong, there, identity theorist. Oh, that's it. Not a. Let's see here. Let me pull that up.
Pessimistic
Sorry.
idealism. Pessimistic idealism. Do you think that I know this is like buzzword stuff, but I can't ignore it. Do you think the hard problem is a problem for identity theorists?
Well, I don't really. The whole hard problem, it's difficult to say. It's important to know how it arises, and I think it arises from certain misconceptions as to the nature of experience. If one understands experience a certain way, it shouldn't cause such a problem. Oh fuck.
I understand. I've heard you say this before, and like I'm not a materialist either, so the hard problem isn't a hard problem for me, in my opinion. The hard problem shouldn't be a hard problem for an idealist or a solipsist. The hard problem is a hard problem, in my opinion, for a materialist. And so for an identity theorist, to me, it could be an issue, you know? And yeah. I understand that you're going to say the hard problem should be a non-issue or arises from misconceptions. I would agree, but that's a different conversation. We're talking about people who are likely materialist or scientific naturalists. Is that an issue for them?
No.
All right. Let's hear how you tap dance your way out of it, Quantum.
You have to assume my worldview. Do you understand?
Okay. All right. Okay.
What was it? The hard problem? I mean, the hard problem is just
even if it's true that nothing is coherent outside your worldview, it's probably better not to mention it. I'm sure if that was ironic or not. Go ahead.
Hard problem is like kind of stupid, right? Because like in large part it hinges on like the zombie argument, which is like just a terrible argument, right? So there you go.
Well, I can
basically
also
saying consciousness. We don't need to account for that because it's stupid, and I'm saying that's kind of stupid.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I could. Well, I can also give a little bit of insight on that. At 43, the hard problem happens a lot less often.
More of a soft problem at that point, right?
Most definitely not a hard.
David Armstrong, another materialist.
Man, you
And
just
then
want
Thanks,
to
Jen. I'm
see
glad
how
He
somebody
looks
got
like a
that.
Halloween ornament.
you could pick
Yeah,
ugly
but
with whoever.
that's good, Eddie, because in your teens and early 20s, the hard problem, it really is a problem, and a time-consuming one.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I'll be out there in a little bit. You're going to have to give me a few minutes. I got to sit here for a minute. Give me a blanket.
Look at that guy. He's creepy. Crypt keeper.
I was just thinking of that old show, Tales from the Crypt.
That's literally like what they are.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Now here,
hard problem,
well,
soft problem, medium problem.
I bet these guys have a soft problem.
Well, here is a huge problem that is like pressing today. Do I get the scoop Tostitos or the round ones?
Oh, that is a dilemma. I think the round ones are better because the scoop ones are good if you like a bunch of salsa on your chips.
Oh, I do. I like a lot of sauce.
But if you don't want that much sauce per chip ratio, then the scoops just kind of like stab you in the top of your mouth.
There's a little bit of excess erection on the scoop.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if you
Live,
put
Eddie? Eddie, I don't know if you care, but this is live. I won't put your YouTube channel in the description of the video, though. How's that sound?
I haven't said anything bad at all. What do you mean? What are you insinuating,
Yeah,
Jen? What do you think
Nothing
I'm
at all.
talking
Just
about?
wanted to give you a friendly advice. Nothing at all.
Yeah, no, actually, I didn't know y'all were still recording, but I don't care.
I think like 3 or 4 people didn't know that, which honestly is way more exciting. People get to see behind the curtain, you know.
I don't even know if anyone's actually listening. Like, I'm looking at the YouTube comments. They don't seem to correlate to the conversation anymore in the main stage chat, which has been about other things for some time. Anyone else have any opinions on selecting people to emulate their views based on how appealing they are? For aesthetic reasons?
Why is Daryl saying oof?
More importantly, how sexy is Sean Carroll?
Wait a minute. You mean it's not just being recorded; it's being streamed live now?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, y'all can catch me
Silence.
at my YouTube channel, Friction. My name is Detroyer. It's a cool
Detroyer
channel.
was already on this channel earlier, and your name is showing, I'm sorry, on the screen.
And my name.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to troll. I'm really T-Jump.
Yeah, see, we just have our avatars changed. I'm actually J-Mike.
You go to my website, I have a whole bunch of funny debates.
I loved how that channel.
But twist, it's Ilmatic
server
pretending
ended
to
up
be
getting
T-Jump,
deleted.
pretending to be Eddie.
Actually, I am Ilmatic. Whenever you hear Ilmatic,
you caught me on that one.
There is no such person as Ilmatic. He doesn't exist. It's like Fight Club, you guys. Sorry. It's me and Ilmatic are the same person the whole time. Have you ever noticed like that we don't overtalk each other? It's because that's impossible.
I have noticed I've never seen him and Jay Dyer in the same room.
Actually, Oh wait, so wait, Ilmatic is actually also Jay Dyer. Oh my God, Gaspar just leaves. He just.
I think he had too many beers and fell down and knocked his thing off the table.
Yeah, he keeps doing this. He keeps like completely leaving, and then he sits in the audience, and then he comes back.
Okay, there, Quantum.
Oh wait, what? Yeah, are you good?
I'm not so good, to be honest.
Why?
Ritagi-san.
Wait, did you speak Japanese?
Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. And I will be out, I think, for the night. Well, this was a lot of fun. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks for sharing your views. Looking forward to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Have a good night.
Peace out.
All right, then. Now we like end the stream, and then we can chill. PI left, so like, I mean, Gaspar is like not cool enough to keep the YouTube stream going for. You know what I mean?
I disagree. He's just cool enough.
You want to take a vote? Just kidding. We can wrap it up and